Hello everyone, and welcome back to Echoes of Fear. I know many of you watch these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, how about leaving a comment letting me know where you're watching from? If you're enjoying the case, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into the story. The yard sale on Hollow Creek Road, Lexington, Kentucky, October 14th, 2023. It was a cold and overcast Saturday in Lexington, Kentucky. Orange leaves covered the streets, and a sharp wind whistled between the houses of the Hollow Creek neighborhood. Sarah Donnelly, 32, was organizing a yard sale in front of her home on Hollow Creek Road, trying to get rid of accumulated clutter. There were old furniture, clothes, books, childhood toys that belonged to her late brother, and some boxes of objects that had belonged to her grandfather, who had died in 1998. Around 9:30 a.m., a middle-aged man wearing a black leather jacket, dark sunglasses, and a Cincinnati Reds cap appeared. He seemed hesitant, observing everything with excessive attention. When Sarah greeted him, he forced a smile and began rummaging through the items. He picked up a small dark wooden chest, seemingly of little value, and asked for the price. Sarah, not remembering exactly where it came from, offered it for $10. The man immediately pulled a crumpled bill from his pocket and paid without bargaining. As he left, he turned and said in a near whisper, "I hope you didn't open it." The words echoed in Sarah's mind. As soon as the man disappeared around the corner, she felt a shiver run up her spine. Intrigued, she rushed inside and called her mother. "Mom, do you remember that dark wooden chest that was among Grandpa's things?" On the other end of the line, there was an eerie silence. Then her mother whispered, "Sarah, that chest was buried with your grandfather." Sarah's blood ran cold. The buyer's disappearance. In the days that followed, Sarah couldn't get the conversation out of her head. She decided to dig into the past and sifted through old photo albums. In one picture, taken at her grandfather's funeral in 1998, there was the small chest resting on the open casket. How had it ended up in her garage? Curious and terrified, she called the Lexington Police Department and asked to speak with Detective Mark Holloway, a family acquaintance. She explained the story and mentioned the strange buyer. Holloway promised to investigate. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a call. "Sarah, I need you to come to the department now." When she arrived, Holloway showed her a photo. "Is this the man who bought the chest?" Sarah nodded. The detective sighed and slid a file toward her. The name on the cover read, "Daniel Grayson, missing since 2004. "The problem, Sarah," Holloway continued, "is that Daniel Grayson disappeared almost 20 years ago, and this is the last known photo of him alive. He was declared dead in 2010. Shock took hold of Sarah. That doesn't make sense," she stammered. "I saw this man 2 weeks ago." The gruesome conclusion. The police reviewed security camera footage from around the yard sale, but there was no record of the man. He simply did not appear in the recordings. The strangest part? 2 days after the sale, an abandoned shack on the outskirts of Winchester Road mysteriously caught fire. Among the charred remains, firefighters found one nearly intact object, the dark wooden chest. Inside, there was a yellowed photograph of Daniel Grayson and Sarah's grandfather, both much younger. On the back, a hastily scrawled sentence read, "What is buried should never be unearthed." The case remains unexplained. The chest was stored as evidence, but no officer wanted to go near it. Sarah moved away from Hollow Creek Road and never held another yard sale again. A new mystery. About a month later, Sarah began receiving anonymous calls in the middle of the night. When she answered, all she heard was a distant whisper, followed by a crackling noise and the sound of something scratching against wood. She changed her number, but the calls continued. One day, an unmarked envelope arrived at her new home. Inside was a single photograph, a grainy image of her yard sale taken from a distant angle. On the back, the same phrase found in the chest was written, "What is buried should never be unearthed." Sarah sold her house and moved across the country, but to this day, she has the eerie feeling that something, or someone, is still watching her. In her new city, Sarah tried to start over, but the strange events continued. One night, while organizing her new home, she found a box she didn't recognize. Inside was an old key and a note. "You thought you could escape?" The chest always returns to those who try to get rid of it. Terrified, she contacted Holloway again. He traveled to her new residence, and together they reopened the investigation. As they dug deeper, they discovered that Daniel Grayson was not just another missing person. His name was linked to a cold case from 1975 involving a secret cult in Kentucky. As their search intensified, Sarah and Holloway began noticing disturbing details. Shadowy figures lurking nearby, calls that ended in dead silence, and an increasing sense that something far more sinister was at play. The mystery of the chest was not just about Daniel Grayson or her grandfather. It was about a cycle of events that had been repeating for decades, a cycle no one had ever managed to break. What Sarah didn't know was that the real horror was yet to come, and that no matter where she went, the chest would always find its way back to her. Let's move on to the next story. Vanishing in Salem, Massachusetts, November the 3rd, 2023. It was a cold and misty Friday night in Salem, Massachusetts. The historic town, known for its eerie past and witch trials, was settling down after the Halloween festivities. At exactly 9:45 p.m., Emily Carter, a 27-year-old journalist, parked her car on Essex Street near the Old Town Hall. She had been working on an article about unsolved disappearances in Salem, a town notorious for ghost stories, but she had never expected to become part of one. Emily had arranged to meet Detective Nathan Holloway, a seasoned officer with the Salem Police Department, at the Black Veil, an occult shop on Derby Square. He had agreed to share classified details about the case of Daniel Everett, a college student who had vanished without a trace in 1997. However, when Emily arrived, the shop was closed, its windows dark. Holloway was nowhere to be found. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Too late. You shouldn't have come." A chill ran down her spine. She called Holloway, but his phone went straight to voicemail. The eerie silence of the empty street sent her heart racing. Something was wrong. A cryptic lead. The next morning, Emily went to the Salem Police Department, but Holloway had not reported for duty. Concerned, she checked his home address, an apartment on Bridge Street. His car was still in the driveway, but his front door was ajar. Inside, the apartment was undisturbed except for a single envelope resting on the kitchen counter. Emily hesitated before opening it. Inside was a Polaroid photo of Holloway, his face frozen in terror, standing in front of a decayed building she didn't recognize. On the back, a handwritten note read, "Find the house. Find the truth." The timestamp on the photo was November 3rd, 1997, exactly 26 years ago to the day. But that was impossible. The forgotten house. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily searched through old property records. After hours of research, she discovered an abandoned house on the outskirts of Salem, near Gallows Hill. The house had once belonged to the Everett family, Daniel Everett's family. Driving to the location at sunset, Emily found the decaying structure, its windows shattered, the front door missing. She hesitated but stepped inside, flashlight in hand. Dust coated the floor, and a faint scent of mildew filled the air. The deeper she ventured, the more unnatural the silence became. In the living room, she found a stack of VHS tapes labeled with years: 1997, 2003, 2012, and 2023. Her breath caught in her throat. The latest tape had today's date written on it. She hesitated before pressing play on an old TV. Static filled the screen before cutting to a live feed of herself, standing in the very room she was in. A figure moved behind her, the unseen presence. Emily spun around, but the room was empty. The TV flickered again, now showing Holloway tied to a chair, his eyes wide with fear. A voice crackled through the static. "You searched too deep, Emily. Now you stay." Suddenly, the house shook violently, as if something unseen was awakening. The walls cracked, and the temperature plummeted. She grabbed the VHS tape and ran out just as the entire structure collapsed behind her. Gasping for breath, she sped back to the police station and handed over the tape. When played, it showed nothing but static, except for the last frame. Holloway's terrified face, followed by a whisper, "One always replaces the last." The next morning, a new missing person report was filed. The name on the report? Emily Carter. But she had never left Salem. She was still there, just not in this world anymore. The endless loop. Weeks later, a local historian named James Lowell took interest in Emily's disappearance and began his own investigation. He traced her steps, reading her last published articles, visiting her home, and even finding her abandoned car still parked near Essex Street. But the most disturbing discovery came when he received an anonymous package. Inside was a VHS tape with the label 1997. Nervously, he played it on an old television set. The footage was grainy, flickering, but unmistakable. It was Emily Carter, sitting in the same decayed house she had found. She was crying, whispering something over and over again. James turned up the volume. Her words became clear. "Don't come looking. Don't come looking." The screen suddenly cut to Daniel Everett, staring into the camera, his face distorted with fear. The last frame. A new timestamp, November 3rd, 2024. James shut off the TV, his hands trembling. He knew one thing for certain. The cycle wasn't over, and soon it would be his turn. Let's move on to the next story. The Forsaken School. Cold Hollow, Vermont, October 17th, 2023. The town of Cold Hollow, Vermont, was one of those forgotten places where history lingers like a ghost. Located off Route 118, it was a quiet town, surrounded by thick forests and an eerie silence that seemed to stretch for miles. At the heart of this forgotten town stood Blackwood Elementary, an abandoned school that had been shut down in 1996 after a tragedy no one liked to talk about. For decades, the school sat in ruin, its windows shattered, its doors boarded up. But Officer Daniel Mercer, a young deputy with the Vermont State Police, had received several disturbing reports over the past month. Strange lights flickering inside, shadowy figures moving past the broken windows, and most recently, the disappearance of two local teenagers, Liam Grady and Sophia Bell, who had dared each other to explore the school. Determined to investigate, Mercer arrived at Blackwood Elementary at 10:45 p.m. on a cold October night. The air was thick with the scent of rotting wood and damp leaves as he pushed open the rusted front gate. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the faded letters above the entrance. Blackwood Elementary. Knowledge is the light of life. He stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. The forgotten hallways. Mercer found himself in the main hallway, where faded posters of the alphabet peeled from the walls. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by his footsteps. The silence was oppressive except for the occasional sound of dripping water, though there were no leaks in sight. Then the whispers began. Faint, distant, like children, giggling. His grip tightened on his flashlight as he followed the sound down the hallway, past rusted lockers and broken desks. He stopped at room 104, where the door stood ajar. Inside, tiny handprints, as if burned into the wood, covered the walls. In the center of the room lay a tape recorder, somehow untouched by time. He pressed play. A child's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ring around the rosy." A loud bang echoed through the hallway. Mercer turned, his heart hammering. Down the hall, he saw a figure, small, pale, with hollow black eyes, watching him. And then it ran toward him, the missing children. Drawing his weapon, Mercer backed away, but the child vanished before reaching him. A gust of wind rushed through the hall, sending papers flying. The tape recorder screeched before playing again. This time, it was Liam Grady's voice. "Help us. It won't let us leave." Mercer's blood ran cold. He sprinted down the hall, searching for any sign of the missing teens. He pushed open the doors to the gymnasium, and his breath caught in his throat. The entire floor was covered in desks, arranged in perfect rows, facing a single chalkboard. Written in red chalk were the words, "Class in session." As he stepped forward, the temperature plummeted. The desks moved on their own, scraping against the floor, forming a circle around him. And then he saw them. Liam and Sophia stood at the back of the room, their faces frozen in terror, their eyes hollow. They tried to speak, but no sound came out. Behind them, a tall, shadowy figure emerged, its elongated fingers wrapping around their shoulders. It had no face, just a gaping void where its eyes should be. The whispers grew deafening. The vanishing Mercer raised his radio, but it only crackled with static. The shadow figure lifted a hand, and suddenly, Mercer's limbs locked in place. The desks trembled violently, the chalkboard cracked, and the whispering turned into screaming. The last thing Mercer saw was the figure pulling Liam and Sophia into the darkness, their silent screams etched into his mind. Then, everything went black. The aftermath. When Mercer woke up, he was outside the school, lying on the cold ground. His radio buzzed. "Officer Mercer, respond." His hands trembled as he pressed the button. "I'm here." The school behind him was intact, as if nothing had changed. The doors were boarded shut again, the windows still broken. There was no sign of Liam or Sophia. A single piece of chalk lay beside him, and scrawled in the dirt were 3 words, "Class dismissed." Mercer staggered to his feet, his mind racing. He had no idea how he got outside. The school looked untouched, yet the memory of what had happened inside still clung to him like a fever dream. The next morning, he filed his report. But when detectives arrived to search the school, they found nothing out of place. No desks in the gymnasium, no tape recorder, no evidence of Liam or Sophia ever being there. The building was exactly as it had been for decades. Abandoned, empty, dead. And yet, Mercer couldn't shake the feeling that something inside was still watching, still waiting. That night, he received a text message from an unknown number. It was a picture of room 104, and standing in the center was a new student. Mercer recognized his own face. Let's move on to the next story. Vanished in the mountains, Asheville, North Carolina, October 9th, 2023. Detective Ethan Carter stared at the case file spread across his desk at the Asheville Police Department. A single Polaroid sat on top. Daniel and Olivia Harper, a married couple from Raleigh, smiling at the base of the Blue Ridge Parkway, taken just hours before they vanished. It had been 7 days since their disappearance, and no trace had been found. No footprints, no abandoned car, no signs of foul play. Just gone. The only clue? A final voicemail Daniel had left his brother. "We made it up to Black Balsam Knob. Something's wrong. Olivia's acting strange. I think someone's here. We hear." The message ended abruptly. Carter sighed, grabbing his coat. He had spent years working homicide but missing persons cases, especially those that made no logical sense, were the ones that haunted him. Into the woods. The morning fog was thick when Carter arrived at Black Balsam Knob, a remote hiking trail along the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Harper's car was still parked near milepost 420, undisturbed, keys inside. That meant they had gone into the woods willingly. With him was Ranger Thomas Green, a veteran park official who had searched these mountains for 20 years. "Something about this place feels off," Green muttered as they stepped onto the trail. "Locals talk about the Mountain Watcher, some old legend about people vanishing out here." Carter didn't believe in folklore. He believed in facts. An hour into the hike, they reached a small campsite. A smoldering fire still burned. A backpack lay half-zipped, a journal inside, the last page scrawled frantically. "It's watching. Olivia won't stop staring into the trees. I hear whispers. We need to leave." Then the forest fell silent. Not a single bird, not a rustle of leaves. A low hum vibrated through the air, a sound Carter couldn't place. It wasn't the wind or any known wildlife. It was mechanical? No, deeper, almost human. The shadow in the fog. Green raised his flashlight. "Over there!" They followed the light to a cave entrance, barely visible behind thick brush. Inside, something metallic gleamed. Carter crouched, brushing away dirt. His breath caught. A bracelet, Olivia's. Next to it, a deep scratch in the rock. "Let us go." A whisper echoed through the cave, not from Green, not from Carter, from inside. A shadow shifted deep within the tunnel. Then two pale figures stepped forward, Daniel and Olivia. Their eyes were empty. Their mouths opened, but no words came. Only the sound of the voicemail, the exact message Daniel had left, playing from their unmoving lips. The light flickered. Then they disappeared, gone, like they had never been there. Deeper into the unknown. Carter's pulse pounded as Green muttered a curse. They hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the cave. The air grew thick, pressing against their chests like an unseen force. The tunnel stretched further than it should have, twisting and turning like a labyrinth. The deeper they went, the louder the humming became, until it transformed into whispers. A deep grinding sound came from ahead. A door? A gate? Carter pressed forward, Green close behind, until they reached a massive stone wall with markings neither of them recognized. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, pulsing faintly. Then, a hand reached through the stone. Green stumbled backward, but Carter stood frozen as Olivia emerged, her expression vacant, her movements unnatural. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice layered as if multiple people spoke through her. The wall rippled and more figures began to appear. Dozens of them, all with hollow eyes and translucent skin, as if they were trapped between worlds. "Daniel?" Carter said, his voice barely above a breath. Daniel stepped forward, but as he did, the cave trembled. A deafening shriek tore through the space and the figures recoiled. Then Carter saw it. A towering silhouette, hunched and watching, its elongated limbs stretching toward them. The Mountain Watcher. The escape. "Run!" Green shouted, yanking Carter backward as the cave began to collapse. The figures reached out, their silent screams echoing through the tunnel as the stone wall began to reseal itself. They bolted out, just as the entrance sealed shut behind them with a final sickening crunch. Panting, they scrambled back to the trail, not daring to look back. The humming had stopped. The forest remained eerily still. 2 days later, the Harper's car was gone. The case remained unsolved. A week later, Carter received a package. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. Daniel and Olivia stood at Black Balsam Knob, smiling. And behind them, a tall, dark figure loomed in the trees. A note was attached. You were warned. Dear Echoes of Fear. Subscribers, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you who is part of this dark and fascinating journey. From the beginning, the goal of this channel has always been to provide a unique experience, where every horror story, every real crime account is more than just a narrative. It's a deep, engaging connection that resonates with your soul. It's amazing to see the growth of the channel, and none of this would be possible without your support, views, and comments. I often receive messages saying how my stories help calm, relax, and even put you to sleep. Knowing that, in some way, I'm providing an experience that is both chilling and comforting for many of you is the greatest gift I could receive. Every story told here, every account shared is done with the care and respect that you deserve. I am incredibly thankful for your trust in me to be part of this special community. As the channel grows and more people discover the stories we share here, I know the connection between us will only grow stronger. You're not just subscribers, you're true companions on this journey. And of course, the road has just begun. With each new video, more stories and more mysteries will unfold, and I can't wait to continue sharing it all with you. Thank you so much for being part of Echoes of Fear. Let's continue this terrifying and unforgettable ride together. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button if you enjoyed this video. And don't forget to leave a comment. Your thoughts and feedback mean the world to me. With gratitude and shared fear, Echoes of Fear.